everyone for resisting the siren call of Netflix and coming out of your homes on such a cold evening. We are delighted to be in front of you tonight, and you've got an amazing panel of authors. We're going to be talking tonight to the idea about belonging, what it means when you do belong and what it feels like if you don't. I remember when I was growing up, I didn't understand anything about belonging. I really was just trying to fit in. And so that meant for me just trying to dress the same as everyone, not say anything wrong, second guessing myself all of the time, and trying very, very hard to be normal, which was very, very hard. So I'm very pleased that I no longer fit in. But you know, I think that feeling of belonging is something that we work on through our whole lives. You know, the more authentically we own ourselves and the more we are willing to be who we really are with other people, the more we find people who kind of either do like us or don't. And you know, that's kind of okay. But you're not here to talk, listen to me talking. I want to introduce to you tonight our amazing panel, starting with Carly Findlay. Carly is an Order of Australia. Did we say medal winner? Is that what OAM? It's what? OAM. OAM. Ohm. She's Ohm. Carly Ohm. She's an award-winning author, speaker, fashion icon. We were just talking about Leonard Street. I know a lot of the ladies.
They have a sale tonight.
Sale tonight. Disability advocate, appearance activist, and regular media guest. Her book, Say Hello, is both a memoir and a manifesto about difference, acceptance, self-love and belief, and how to become your own fangirl, which, come on, we all needed that. Bebe, we'll go in order of the panel. Bebe is a Bardi Joey award-winning author, poet, illustrator and speaker who began his career as a classical pianist, composer, producer and director. He's also artistic director and CEO of Black and Bright First Nations Literary Festival and deputy chair of Magabala Books. Magabala? Magabala. Bebe's newest book, If This Is the End, has been described as a queer black classic. And last but definitely not least, Jess Knight. Jess is a writer, poet, artist, zine maker, performer and speaker who has performed a one-woman show at Melbourne Fringe and won the Moth Live Storytelling Contest. Her memoir, Strange Little Girl, explores the experience of growing up in a Mormon household on a dairy farm in country Victoria while dealing with chronic illness, invasive medical treatments and disability. So please give a very warm welcome to our If you have any stories about belonging or not belonging that happened, you know, in those formative years when you were still developing your idea about yourself and the world, if you've got any stories that spring to mind about the concept of belonging and what it means to you. Carly?
Yeah, I mean, I didn't feel like I belonged. I grew up in country New South Wales, near Albury, on Wiradjuri country, and it was pretty hard to be a person with a skin condition in a mixed race family in a very white town. And I grew up in a Lutheran town, and I'm not religious at all, but the kids used to say it was because my parents are black and white and they've sinned, and that is why I'm red. That's not scientifically possible at all. But it was really interesting because last year I got to spend some time in South Africa. My mum is South African, and I got to spend time in South Africa as a writing research holiday, and I felt for the first time like I was a person of colour. Like, it was very strange compared to Australia, and I was with my family and like all of them are people of colour. And it was a real sense of belonging, and I went from, you know, being told that my parents were sinners to hearing the story of my parents courting illegally in South Africa because they couldn't marry there and they came to Australia, and I heard what my parents were like before they became my parents. It was really, really great to do that, and I felt like a real sense of belonging, so that was full circle.
Yeah, that's great.
Growing up, I too grew up in the country, but I think one of the biggest ways that I felt like I realized that I might not have belonged was actually just like being at school in like prep. I think it was when I was like 5 or 6, and a girl in my class came up to me in the playground and she was like, "Did you know that when you were born, you nearly died and it was very sad?" And I was like, "Oh, no, I didn't know that." And I went home and I told my mum, and she's like, "What? You didn't nearly die when you were born. How would that child even know that?" And so, like, growing up, a lot of people would make up reasons why I was so tiny compared to like other kids my age and stuff. So there was that part of it, but then other grown-ups would like think I was really smart for like a 2 or 3 year old, and my parents would be like, "No, she's 7," which I wish they didn't say, because I wanted people to think I was like a child prodigy, and it never worked out. But another similar story, when I was at university, and I went to a punk party. These boys who I'd never met before came up to me drunk and excited, and they were like, "Oh my God, it's you!" And I was like, "What do you mean?" They're like, "Okay, when you were did you go to Bendigo Senior High School?" And I said, "Yeah." They're like, "We saw you every day walk past where we used to hang out, and we all thought you were some kind of fucking genius." But like some like 10-year-old or something, and they're like, "Oh, that's amazing." But the thing is, what I took from that is that, yes, I was a weirdo, but also I got noticed by a bunch of boys. So, you know, swings and roundabouts.
So my heritage is Bardi Jawi, which is the top of the Dampier Peninsula of the Kimberley region. But I was born in Kununurra and grew up on Nyingana country, and so that was the first question around belonging that I had was, why aren't we living on Bardi Jawi country, and what would that feel like? The other part of that question of belonging for me and the wondering was, my mum's Aboriginal, my father's not, but my mum was the only one out of her entire Aboriginal family to marry a white person, which means that every single one of my cousins, aunties, uncles, everyone in my extended family is black. And so me and one of my sisters were the only ones in the entire extended family with white skin, which, you know, theoretically maybe should have meant something or made me feel a particular way, but it didn't. It certainly did make for interesting family photos to just, you know, have a sea of brown and black faces, and there's this 2 little white kids down the front, like, who are they? What are they doing there? But that, you know, similar to what you were saying, Carly, about feeling for the first time that you belonged when you went to South Africa. As much as I feel like my childhood, you know, for all of its reasons, was horrendous because of my father and the ways that I silenced and suppressed myself. I felt so at home being with my Aboriginal family, and you know, and so in order to do that, I needed to not be home, because my mother, although Aboriginal, was raised in a white home, so she had no knowledge of or practice of her identity and her culture, And so the house that I grew up in was very, like, we would go to school, me and my siblings, and we'd come home, and because the town that we grew up in, you know, majority Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander, and so we picked up, you know, well, we'd go to school and we'd just speak in the thickest accents and Creole and Pidgin, and so we'd take that home with us. And we would get, as soon as we started speaking to each other or speaking to our parents, it would be, I remember specifically one day my mum, and the irony of it, you know, that Aboriginal woman with brown skin saying to me, do not talk like that, you've been raised to speak better than that. And I hated that because I just wanted to be able to speak my language. Which takes me back to that first point, growing up on Yigana country, if I wanted to speak language from picking it up in the community, I would be speaking Yigana. So I couldn't speak my own language because I had no way to connect myself with it except through my grandmother. So that's why I was never at home as a kid and as a teenager. I was always with my grandmother, always with my cousins, being able to be myself, to speak in any way or language I wanted to, and I found that just very bizarre, that in order to be myself I had to leave home.
So many things that you've all just said there that has made a lot of doors in my mind open, but I guess I think one of the things you're talking about is about, you know, the intersection of identity and belonging, and it's the identities that some people put on you. You know, it's like when people describe you in a certain way and it doesn't feel like you, it just feels like how has that even happened? And it feels like a completely disempowering thing. And then there's this opposite thing that we can do, which is to embrace some of our identities. You know, you might have been resistant to it, you might have, you know, seen the shadow side of what it is to be that certain identity. And I guess I'm interested in your perspectives on where identity fits into the concept of belonging. If anyone had it.
Despite everything that I just said about my whitewashing family, my mother always made a very clear point in instilling within me and my siblings that we were in fact Aboriginal, and to be proud of that, but just in a particular way. And so there was always that knowledge that was never lost. However, with my sexuality, because of where I grew up, and you know, stereotypical father just being the man's man and all the rest of it, and my brother was, you know, cut from his cloth, and so you know, he was the one into the bodybuilding and all the rest of it, and I was the one off in the library playing the piano. But I remember, because it was such a tiny little town and there was such a lack of resources and services, we had no idea, well, I had no idea what a queer identity was or could even be. And so I remember when I first started to pay attention to the difference in my identity, and you know, I must have been about 7, 8, 9, somewhere in that bracket, where I started to realise, I like to hang out with the girls, but I'm not attracted to them. Like, I'm sitting here looking at Nathan over there and he's cute. And the first thought that I had to myself was, does this make me a girl? And so I was so confused because I just didn't know. And because there was so much confusion, lack of direction, no one to turn to, no one to come to me and say, hey, I know that you're different, let me talk to you. I had to figure everything out on my own, but I didn't want to because I didn't know how to, so I suppressed everything and led with my black identity. And it wasn't until I was 18 that I came to be comfortable with every facet Well, not every facet. I mean, there were still parts of me that I didn't know at that point in time, relating to, you know, mental illness and whatnot. But it's the vulnerability that is the most empowering thing that I can do for myself and for others. If I can be vulnerable and say, this is who I am, I'm black, I'm gay, I live successfully with mental illness, then that's me embodying everything about me and my identity. And if I can't belong to any time, place, or person, at least I can belong to myself. And that's the most powerful thing I can do.
It's also like in those spaces where you can be your authentic self is like so helpful, because I know that from my perspective and stuff, I didn't ever want to write a memoir about all the stuff that I ended up writing about. I actually kept all of that pretty much to myself for a really long time. Or like I would make jokes about it, like I make jokes about growing up Mormon or growing up on the farm, and like I would tell these stories at like parties or things when I was a bit older, thinking that they were hilarious. And it's always a bit confronting when you tell an anecdote that you think is like, it's so funny, and everyone is just like, are you okay?
I've done that. I've done that many good. You go,
And like, you're the only one laughing.
Tough crowd.
Funny thing. I was distraught and sad, and it was horrible. But you know, in a funny way. In a funny way.
Horrifyingly funny.
And I always just thought, well, I'm just not telling it right, and so I'm like, it'll work on the
But
material.
also, I think sometimes when we're discussing certain things about ourselves, people don't feel like they might have permission to laugh.
That's true.
Yeah.
And I also don't like victimizing myself. I've always been very uncomfortable with that whole idea. It might be the farming upbringing, it might be the fact that like I was raised in a religion that basically tells you from a very young age that anything bad that happens to you, you chose it in the pre-existence. So you're not meant to like think of it as like technically a bad thing. So like even before I was able to like figure out how I felt about things, I was already being told what to feel about things that happened to me. And I think being told how you should feel about your own trauma is like, the repercussions are very hard to let go of. Like, even now, I joke about being raised Mormon and stuff, but there's a part of me that still fears that I'm going to go to hell for even talking about it. The indoctrination runs deep. But yeah, if there's any Mormon parents in the audience, I'm so sorry. But this is Northcote, surely it's...
I was thinking of what Bebe said about, you know, the intersecting identities, and I didn't think about my race for a long time. I took a long time to become accepting of my skin condition. It's called ichthyosis, and it was only until I became a member of the disability community, so when I started identifying, even though I had a disability all my life, that I became comfortable enough to explore race as well, because it was too much to think about two things. And that has been really great. When I talk about disability, people say, well, why do you use the word disability? It's a negative. And I say, well, no, to me it's community, and it's culture, and it's identity, and it's pride, because even though a lot of being disabled is really shit because of the way society reacts to us, and also how our bodies and minds can be, there's so much good and so much joy in being a part of the community and feeling that belonging. I think that's a really important thing to remember.
And it's, you know, if you weren't sort of embracing that identity and stepping into that, I can imagine, you know, there's people who, if you're in denial of that aspect of self, or you're uncomfortable with that, putting that label on yourself. I've had recent ADHD diagnosis, and I was like, oh thank God. There's actually other people who are like me. Great, where are you? I'm going to talk to you. No, I'll talk to you.
It's quite exhausting, you know, trying to be someone that you're not or fit into something.
And I think it's that the role of sort of exposure therapy, you know, the reason that representation is actually important is because it's, you know, what is other? We're entirely wired to see strange or danger is very real inside of our bodies, right? So this idea of different is potentially dangerous is kind of like a primal, you know, it's not even intentional, you know, people can add layers of bullshit on top of their stuff and, you know, decide to have some, you know, wrong town opinions, but there's a primal part to it as well, which is why I think, you know, I really like the fact that we are seeing more representation. And I guess I wonder what your perspectives are on that, because I think it has a really value, you know, just in terms of that, you start to see people as people because you're exposed to them instead of seeing them as a different to you and just going, you're a different to me.
Yeah.
I'm a me and you're a different to me. You know, and that's the surface level of engagement. So I guess I'm interested in your perspectives on that.